So we've talked about caregiving stress and how normal it is to be stressed, and also some ways that you can reduce that stress, some specific techniques that you can use to cope more effectively with the caregiving stress. Now I'd like to move into a different topic. I'd like to talk about another possible impact of caregiving on many caregivers, and that is that they become depressed. Now, when I use the term depression, I'm actually referring to a wide range of possible symptoms and feelings. And I'd like to take a moment to explain this a little bit more so that you can understand what we mean by the term depression. So at the one end, we have people who feel blue, sad, frustrated, maybe guilty, some of the time. They feel it, it comes and goes. It doesn't last very long, and when these feelings come, they're not that intense. They kind of come and go. At the other extreme, we have caregivers who become clinically depressed. This is about 30% of all caregivers. And again, this is true in cross-cultural research in other countries of the world as well as in the United States. And what we mean by clinical depression is that the person not only has these feelings of being sad, maybe tearful, perhaps somewhat hopeless about the future, feeling guilty that they're not doing enough, but they also have other symptoms along with those feelings. For example, they have trouble sleeping. They either sleep too much or not enough. They have trouble with appetite. They don't eat well, either, again, too much or too little. They often feel extremely fatigued and without energy, even if they might have had somewhat reasonable sleep the night before. They often feel that the future is really pretty hopeless. There's relatively little to look forward to. And finally, for some individuals, this leads to thoughts of suicide, taking their own lives. So if as a caregiver you find that you have this cluster of symptoms and feelings and they persist for a period of time, now the minimum, according to the diagnostic criteria that are used, is 2 weeks. But we find that most caregivers have experienced these symptoms for much longer than that before they actually seek professional attention. So if this describes you, it would be a very good idea to talk to your primary care physician about these symptoms and to tell that person that you're thinking perhaps you're depressed about caregiving and maybe other things going on in your life as well, so that you can get appropriate treatment. Medication, there are many medications that effectively treat depression. There are forms of psychological counseling or psychotherapy that are effective for treating depression. The most commonly used is called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's available in many parts of the country and by practitioners who can speak different languages. So these would be some options for treatment. If you find that you are so overwhelmed that you really have thoughts of suicide, perhaps even you're developing a plan for how to do this act, then please consult with a professional, either your primary care physician or a mental health professional, as soon as possible. These thoughts and impulses toward suicide should not be ignored. They do need professional assistance. Now, the majority of caregivers fall in between. They are not clinically depressed, but they have feelings that persist, feelings of sadness or guilt or frustration, feelings that they're not doing enough, feelings that they are just worn out. And so that's the group that I'm talking to right now, those individuals who are in between these two ends. So if you have these depressive symptoms, there are some things that you can do that can help you to feel better about yourself and to reduce your level of depression. So there are several steps in this process. The first is to identify what those negative thoughts really are. And that might be difficult because they tend to be kind of automatic, which means that they just come. We're not even that aware of them until we sit down and think about it. So the first skill is to learn to record these negative thoughts. Record the situation in which they happened, what the thoughts are that are going through your mind, and what are the feelings associated with those thoughts. And then the second step is to begin to challenge the thoughts. And generally we can do that by using a technique called examine the evidence. This is a very widely used technique, and it's helpful to many individuals. And what it means is that you really try to objectively evaluate the situation and see whether or not your thoughts are 100% accurate. And what we find time and again is that caregivers' thoughts are not accurate, that they are often emphasizing the negative and not recognizing the positive, not recognizing what they are doing, but instead focusing on what they're not doing or what they think they're not doing well enough. Perhaps the person is comparing themselves to other caregivers or to some idealized set of expectations about how they should behave. So by challenging these thoughts, by trying to look at them from another perspective, look at them more objectively, we can often change the thoughts. This often leads us to more adaptive ways of thinking about the situation. For example, I might have started out by thinking, I'm a failure as a caregiver. I am not doing enough for my mother or my sister or my spouse or my mother-in-law. I just am not living up to the expectations of the family. But when you look at it more objectively, you could make a list of what you do for that individual. You might make a list of some of the other responsibilities that you have, and you might say to yourself in conclusion, I'm doing a pretty good job juggling all of these responsibilities. And that might lead you then to a different way of thinking, namely, maybe I'm not perfect, I'm probably not the best caregiver that ever lived, and I guess I'm not doing everything I could do for my mother or my spouse or my sister, whoever it may be, but I am doing a good job. And when I look at it from different angles, I think I'm doing enough. If I'm not doing enough, I'm going to bring some help into the home. I'm going to find an alternative, an option, so that I'm not carrying the burden all by myself. So that's a very effective technique that people can learn to use. And if you use it on a regular basis, I think you'll find that you'll get some real benefit from it. Now, the second one I also mentioned a little bit previously, and that was increasing activities that you like, that are pleasurable, that are enjoyable on a daily basis. Now, it can be different things, different days of the week. The idea is, though, to aim for 4. That's what you might say is the magic number. 4 pleasant activities a day keeps the blues away. We've done a lot of research to confirm that fact, and we find that caregivers who diligently plan in these pleasant activities and do their best to keep them going on a regular basis, that these are the ones who find that their depression really does reduce. It really does get less. So the combination of challenging the negative thoughts and doing more positive things for oneself, either alone or with your loved one, I think that's worth mentioning as well. That many times when we're in the caregiving role, we're taking on so much responsibility that we forget how to enjoy that other person. We forget what we used to do together that we liked. Maybe we have to explore a little to find out some things that we could do now together that we would both like, but it's very doable. And some simple suggestions would be to listen to music together that your loved one enjoys, to look at photo albums together, because oftentimes their past memory remains quite intact, even though current memory may be very impaired, or to do an outing that perhaps that person used to like and might like at least a little bit again. So pleasant activities can be for yourself or alone, or they can be things that are shared with your loved one. And by using that combination, changing the thoughts and increasing the activities, I think you will find that the depressive symptoms will definitely become less over time.